Hi everybody, that's me, Professor Kevin. In this class, we are going to see some differences between direct and oblique translation techniques. Okay, first of all, let's discuss and talk about the direct translation techniques. In this case, we have three techniques: borrowings, calque, and literal translation. First of all, let's start with the first one. So actually you can see this over the presentation. But I can tell you that borrowing is the taking of the words directly, of course, from one language into another without translation. So you see some examples. Now, when you copy the same word, the same word is for all languages. Of course, not for all languages, but just for one or two or five languages. Now, for example, pizza, sushi, taxi. There are some common words that they are the same in many different languages. I don't know if in Chinese could be, maybe it's the same. I'm not sure about it. Okay, so one more time. Borrowing is the taking of words directly from one language to another. Of course, without translation. So we don't need translation for these words. Calque. You have a word right here. Some definition, but I can tell you now the definition. Calque is also called loan translation. And it's a phrase. It's a phrase borrowed from another language and translated literally, word for word. Okay. So you see some examples over there, no? Carburetor structure mayo fa instead of fa e mayo. Which example do we have in order to understand this much better? What about White House, Casa Blanca, right? So it's exactly the same. Yes. Okay, so let's continue with another word. Let's see something important that I had to tell you about this. Let me think about it. Let's see. Do you understand the idea, right? Don't forget, when you borrow a word from another language, okay, and you translate this word literally, word for word. As I told you, no? Casa Blanca, White House. Yes. I think that this is okay. Let's continue. What about a literal translation? What is your idea and opinion about it? In this case, we have the following ideas, no? A word for word translation can be used in some languages and not others, depending of the sentence structure. Okay, it's when you copy exactly the same and you don't need to change anything else. Okay, so I have for example, good morning, buenos días. Okay, I have no example for you. El equipo está trabajando para terminar el informe. El equipo está trabajando para terminar el informe. So if we translate this, literally it would be the team is working to finish the report. But sometimes it works, right? It can work, but not sometimes. So there are some cases that they won't be the same, no? In some cases, of course. That's why we are understanding the use of them. Okay? Once again, to finish, just to understand everything. Borrowing, yes, it's when you find a word that you don't need to translate in different languages. For example, I say this, I need a taxi. So in Spanish, necesito un taxi. So we use the same word. And calque, when you copy the exactly word, right? The key word is here, word for word. Casablanca, White House. Yes, don't forget about it. Unliteral translation, it's when you translate literally the word. Okay, but it works in some cases, because most of the time it's not exactly the same when we want to translate this, no, like breakfast, break, romper, fast, rápido. And sometimes it's not the same, so it's just for some words. Okay, so let's continue. Let's see. Let's see. Give me a second here. Let's continue with the second activity. Give me a second. Let's continue with oblique translation techniques. First of all, we see there some important instructions for you. And here you see some definitions that can help you, of course. And in this case, we have transportation, modulation, reformulation or equivalence, adaptation, and compensation. First of all, we have the first one, that is transposition. Transposition. So transposition is the process where, well, actually the most important here are part of speech, okay? When the parts of speech change their sequence when they are translated. Yes. Here you see some example. Now the reconstruction of the city is very important. Reconstructing the city is very important too. To reconstruct the city is very important. Okay, that is the idea. Modulation. Modulation consists of using a phrase that is very different in the source and target languages to convey the same ideas. Let's see. Here we have an example, no? It's not difficult, it is easy. We can change it. No? Exactly is the same idea here. Changing the point of view without changing the meaning of the message. Alright, it's really complicated. It's really complicated. It's very difficult. Okay, I understand. Okay. So you can paraphrase the word, but don't lose the message. Okay. So the equivalence, let me see about it. The equivalence or reformulation. It's when let's see. Here it says generally refers to the commonly accepted and used equivalence of idioms, proverbs, idiomatic expressions, and lexicalized terms. For example, terms commonly accepted as equivalents of source language learned. Stop splitting hairs. Deja de buscarle 5 patas al gato. Okay, so the main idea here is when translating idioms or advertising slogans, especially, it's a process. This process is create, but not always very easy most of the time. Okay, so the equivalence is when we have to face some idiomatic expressions or slogans from the language that we want to translate into. So we have to be very creative, and of course we have to know about that culture too, no? For example, in the United States, there are many different words that to translate will be different, but the idea has to be the same. The same happens here in Peru, no? Like this, no? Deja de buscarle 5 patas al gato. So start splitting hearts, no? It's idiomatic expression. So the same happens here in Peru, and the same happens in the United States and in different countries. We also need to know the context. Okay? So adaptation. Adaptation says adapting a source language situation when it does not exist in the target language or would be considered inappropriate in the target language. The famous one, no? Adaptation. So let's see. Another way to understand this can be adaptation can occur when something specific to one language culture is expressed in a totally different way that is familiar or maybe appropriate to another language culture. Okay, Do you understand the idea? For example, the sound, the music, sonrisas y lágrimas. No, maybe it happens, especially when titles of movies. I don't know if you ever lived that experience about that. I don't know. You remember there are so many titles like the Notebook, no, el diario de una pasión. So it happens. So in some cases we have to adapt those kind of language too. Okay. And the last one here, let's see. This is compensation. Compensation. Let's see here. Compensation is a rather amorphous term, but it can be used where something cannot be translated from source to target language. And the meaning that is lost in the immediate translation is expressed somewhere else in the TTT. What is the main idea about compensation? Well, compensation can be used when something cannot be translated. Okay? And the meaning that is lost is expressed somewhere else in the translated text. That is the idea about it. Okay? I hope you understand much better all the activities that we learned today. Okay, so let's practice one more time. Let's make the feedback here. Transposition, remember, no, replacing words from one grammatical words class with another without changing the meaning of the message. Okay. The idea here is that you can change maybe the order, okay, of these words, but the message can be the same. All right. So, for example, the house of Peter will be the same if you say Peter's house, right? So we have the same message. Modulation, when sometimes we change a word for another, but we don't affect or change the meaning. All right. You see an example over there. It is not difficult. It is easy. Okay. I'm really happy. I'm excited. Yes. Okay. Equivalence. When we need to know some idiomatic expressions and maybe slogans from one language to another. Okay, especially with idiomatic expressions in America or United States. Yes, we should know about it. There are many of them. Also here in Peru, for example, the most common slogans here, like "oh yape," like this, some expressions like that, or maybe another one that we know here in Peru. Can you give me a China? No, it's like, oh, come on, this is 50 cents. All right, so there are some expressions that we should know. Okay. And adaptation here, when we have to adapt, no, some expressions that is not exactly the same meaning in Spanish when you translate it literally, of course, no. The sound music, sonrisas y lágrimas. I'm very sure that you have many examples of them, especially with English movies, right? I remember just one in my mind here that I have this all the time, like the Notebook, no, el diario de una pasión. Wow, what is this? But it's just a notebook, no, el diario. That's okay. Oh, the Joker too, no. el risas, but it's not exactly the same translation. They have many different ways to translate this, no. And the last one, as we saw here, compensation. The most important idea here is that here says it can be used where something cannot be translated. Okay, we have a great idea here, no? Making good one part of the text something that could not be translated in another. So that is just important just to know about this, okay, to have previous knowledge about the use of them, how we use the direct translation and how we use the oblique translation. So after this presentation, I will give you some tips and advices to improve this, okay? Thank you so much for your time. See you next class.